I want to talk about the broad overview of computer science, computer programming, and even computers. The reason is I find these areas very labyrinthine. They seem to be containing a lot of paradox, seemingly, a lot of mysteries, a lot of puzzles to be solved and defined clearly. And in the process of speaking out loudly, I hope that I could undergo the process of thinking out loud, the Ed Sheeran's song. First thing first, I think the reason why these areas regarding computers, programming, computer science, why are they so confusing, so much of containing so much of paradox? The reason is they are very young areas and fields. They are less than 100 years old, probably about 70 or 80 right now. And today, all the fields and areas we take it for granted to be very rigorous and well established, such as mathematics, physics, law, medicine. All these areas are more than 500 years old. I believe back then when Newton first discovered the theory of movement of things and planets, so the so-called Newtonian mechanics, when he first postulated and discovered that, I believe those theories caused a lot of confusion in the world as well. If you look at Newton's first book, the book regarding Newtonian's mechanics, the book regarding Newtonian's mechanics, the name is called Philosophy and the Principia Mathematica. The name itself implies that it is related to philosophy and mathematics, and there wasn't a word physics on his book's title. The reason is back then no one knew what is physics. There was no such thing. And even Newton himself regarded that as philosophy and mathematics. Of course, later on through evolution and progress of science, people sort of slowly, gradually building all the building blocks of physics. And today physics became a really well-established field. Likewise, I believe computer science and programming would eventually undergo the same evolution when, for example, if in year 2500, by then computer science and programming would have undergone 500 years of evolution. By then, all the confusions we have today would be resolved by then. So first thing, what I find confusing is the eternal debate of whether computer programming is a science or an art. Alright, first of all, if you are to argue that it is an art, the problem is that for a lot of people, computer programming seems to be mandating quite a lot of rules. The syntaxes, the algorithms, things like that. It seems to be quite scientific because generally we regard science as a rigid, rigorous, well-established bodies of rules. That's why you have chemistry. You have a very rigorous, correct, tested periodic table, clearly enunciating all the 118 elements. And likewise, physics, you have endless equations. So in science, people normally accept that science contains a lot of rules. And likewise, computer science seems to be similar. That's why people argue that computer programming is a science. However, you must also pay attention. Okay, physics and chemistry are natural science and biology. That means they have high regard towards the reality. If the planets move in that way, physics follow it. You have no own volition to say anything. If the chemical elements react like that, you have to follow and state those rules very clearly. Those are sizes. However, in computer programming, is that true? Although yes, you do write algorithms, there are some rules, but however, it seems to be evolving eternally. People could create new algorithms out of their own imagination. People could create new programming languages. People could create new compilers, new operating systems. So when a domain involves the creation of new things, that is actually not a science anymore, at least not like natural sciences, not empirical science. It has no regard to reality. That's why some people regard computer programming as an art, just like a painter painting a picture, or a musician composing a music. A human use the mind, the ideas, to concoct and create something out of nothing. Of course, you have some tools. You use computers, painters use brushes, but however you create something out of nothing, that's the artistic element of computer programming. Especially you create a software out of nothing, and suddenly things that software could do some work. It could perform calculations for you. It could be a computer video games. It could be a software that edit movies and videos. That is the artistic element of computer programming. And not only that, besides the popular science versus art debate, some people also call computer science engineering. It is about getting things done. That's why there is a field called software engineering. And in fact, if you think about it carefully, it is. For example, when you have a song editing software, you create a software, and then the software enables you to mass produce a lot of music and tones. You could pull it to become high pitch, low pitch, and so on. That seems very similar to what engineers normally do, because what do real engineers do? They leverage on all the things in nature and build something useful. So the conventional one is civil engineers. They use rocks, they use concrete to build buildings in order to shield humans away from sunlight, rain, thunderstorm. And also, of course, engineers build airplanes, cars out of metals, out of steel, and then make engines. All right, again out of a lot of metals, in order to perform transportation, to move people around. So these are all engineers typically do. And computer programming has a similar element. You make something to do work for people. All right. However, again, there is a problem here. If you regard computer programming as an engineering, the core distinction is in real engineering, people use real things to make real things. You have raw materials. However, if you look at software engineering, it has no raw materials. Absolutely almost none. You could argue, oh, of course, I need a compiler, I need a programming language, I need a integrated development environment. But however, those are quite peripheral. You actually use nothing. You merely use your mind to write some instructions and codes. Eventually, that thing would do work for you. The end product, the software. So that is the part where the definition of computer programming as engineering goes awry. It is very odd. It is actually not same as engineering. You use nothing. And then we could now extend the definition. Computer programming seems to be quite similar to writing, because in writing, writers write on a paper or in a word processor. You write words, all right, to convey ideas. And computer programming are very similar. You write codes. Basically, codes are just words, abstract concept. You write codes, and then as a end result, the entire thing actually look quite similar to how a novelist write a short story. You have maybe 100 pages of codes. That's all. It seems a bit similar to writing, but of course, the the difference between writing and computer programming is that computer programming, the entire 100 pages, if you flip them, they are all logic about construction of instructions, and novel is about stories, about what people understand. So computer programming could be science, could be art, could be engineering, could be writing, and lastly, it is also quite mathematical. So computer programming, people argue it is a form of mathematics, because if you deep down look at algorithms, data structures, you look at how all the functions you have written, how do they interact with each other. Of course, you could calculate the big O notation, the speed of processing, all your codes. All those things are quite embedded in logic, which is the core tenet of mathematics. And therefore it seems very similar. But however, the core difference between mathematics and computer programming is mathematics is about the what, the answer. You find the answer of square root, you're concerned about square root of 9 is 3. But however, in computer programming, no one cares about the final answer. In computer programming, although it is very logical, it seems mathematical. However, computer programming, you're concerned about the how, the process. That's why it is also quite unlike mathematics. So as a result, the actual definition of computer programming and computer science is very sloppy, very promiscuous. It is somewhat engineering, somewhat writing, somewhat mathematics, somewhat science, somewhat arts. Of course, the best argument is that computer science and programming is a thing of itself. So it's a one-of-a-kind thing. You don't use all the things in the past as a reference point. It is a completely new thing human invented. One thing that is very odd, and I haven't really understood it, is why? Okay, because just now as I said, writing versus engineering, which seems to be completely opposite. These two things seem to be completely opposite. No one regards writing as doing things, and no one regards engineering doing things as a form of writing. They are distinctive. So people write either for amusement, you write stories, or you write to convey ideas, something very abstract. And at the same time, engineering is something very concrete. You have an end product. You manufacture and synthesize something out of nothing. However, computer programming seems to be an amalgamation of these two things. It is, on one hand, very abstract like mathematics, like writing and literature. It's about ideas. On the other hand, magically, computer programming is able to bridge the gap, to connect abstract things immediately to end product that do things. It is as if the gargantuan gap between engineering and ideas suddenly is being narrowed, being closed up so narrowly. As a result, today you could just open an IDE and write your idea, and it will do things for you. Alright, so that is a magical part, and that is also a part that I have been exploring, and it is really beguiling. Why the moment you key in some lines of codes, computers will be able to do things for you? It seems very magical, because if you think conventionally, when you write words on papers, nothing gets done. Humans need to read the messages and think, and humans need to do things in order to get things done. But however, today, that barrier has been removed. The abstract ideas could be converted into actions, into products that do work. And when I say work, I mean it in a physical sense. In physics, work means getting things done. Okay, I will probably discuss this in another video. It has something to do with the relation between high programming languages, the if-else while loop, the relation between that to the actual transistor at the end, the binary in your CPU. Alright, so I'll stop here and see you tomorrow.